I want to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. Thank you so much for logging on with Heather Durkin and I in the third annual Germantown Academy Cooperative Learning Program webinar series. This year, we're focusing on the future of work and life after GA. And each night this week, we're showcasing the life, the career, and sort of beginnings of some prominent GA alums working in really different fields. And tonight, I'm so excited to have Elisa Ludwig with us. She's a graduate from 1992. I've known her a very long time, since she was a student at GA, and have continued to be friends as she's developed this very interesting life for herself as an author, a poet, a copywriter, and a new cottage industry baker with a great company she's going to tell you about at the end of the talk. I'm going to remind you guys that if you have questions, just drop them right in the chat at the bottom of the screen, or I'm sorry, in the Q&A, and we'll ask them at the end of Elisa's presentation. And then we'll remind you about the upcoming webinars for the rest of the week. And just to let you know, we are recording tonight, so the entire event can be reviewed at a later date as well. Heather, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can give Elisa a proper introduction.
Wonderful, thank you. So tonight, our session is called The Evolving Career Path. This is the second installment in this year's career conversation webinars, and for it, we're excited to be speaking with published author, content specialist, and entrepreneur, Elisa Ludwig. Tonight's session is focused on the evolving career path, for which Ms. Ludwig will be talking about being open to new turns and possibilities in your career path, using the skills learned in a liberal arts education across a broad array of applications, and not necessarily thinking of your career as linear, but something that evolves with you over time. And that actually is a quote from Elisa during our communications, which I thought was poignant. When describing her professional self on her website, Ms. Ludwig first mentions she is an author of young adult books and currently of adult fiction. She also utilizes her writing skills as a copywriter, as well as in creating content for clients. As a GA student beginning in 4th grade, Elisa was involved in a diverse array of clubs and sports. And I'm just going to read what I pulled out of the yearbook. She's a member of the Academy Club. She was in soccer and softball and volleyball. She was also in CSO for all of upper school. She was a peer counselor, art club, which you know her well for, Gabby, I'm sure. She helped with the yearbook in senior year. She was a member of the astronomy club and the Owen J. Roberts Club. Do you remember all that, Elisa?
No, I was like, the astronomy club, whatever. Yeah, I think
She will be sharing more about her education after GA, including her undergraduate studies at Vassar, followed by her graduate work at Temple. Most recently, she has turned her love of baking into a thriving quote unquote side business called Care Package Bakes, which was named by Philadelphia Magazine's Best of Philly, or for their Best of Philly list in 2022.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. It's a wide variety of skills and interests that makes Elisa particularly capable of pivoting as her career has developed, which she'll talk to us about more. So thank you so much for joining us, Elisa. This is wonderful to have you.
Me. I'm just very excited to be invited and to see you both. And it's been a while. And yeah, just excited to be back at GA. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about my journey. It began here in the picture on the left is actually 6th grade, but I started at GA in 4th grade. I came to GA already wanting to be a writer. Like I've known that since I was in 3rd grade and writing journals in school. And I love to read. And I think there was just something about it. I just knew that that was where I belonged, and I've never really questioned that. But coming to GA and having a much more intensive writing program than I had in public school really allowed me to flourish and develop a lot of those skills. And yeah, GA, I was actually through middle school and upper school, I wrote poetry. I did some stuff with the literary magazine, the poetry club. And that's where I thought my creative interest was, mostly, but I did also, as we mentioned, I was part of the art club. I did really enjoy making visual art. And there was a moment when I was getting ready to go to college. I was thinking about maybe going to art school, but I decided pursuing liberal arts would allow me to do both things that I loved, and maybe also, get the other, get a more well-rounded education in other subject areas. So yeah, on the right is my prom picture and my big 90s hair.
I love it. Can I ask you a quick question about that? I think of you as a Renaissance person, and as you talk tonight, I think that'll come across to everybody. One of the things liberal arts educations really do well is allow you kind of great breadth in what you study in college. And because I've read so much of your work and I understand how various your thinking is on things, can you just talk a little bit about how you drew from even other disciplines that weren't in art or literature that sort of kind of feed your intellectual life that you draw upon for so much of your work?
I mean, I would say in studying English at Vassar, and I also went on to get a master's degree at Temple University in creative writing. Both of those programs, though, there was a lot of theory. It wasn't just, often creative writing programs don't emphasize that.
Okay.
So I think that gave me a different way of thinking about the writing, and just even the forms themselves of the work. And I think I studied I was a French minor, and I was very interested in film, so I took some film
Right.
courses. So I think, but it all, fed these curiosities. And I think that's really maybe the biggest thread that pulls through, is
Yeah.
just cultivating that through life, and not just saying, okay, I'm on my path and I'm doing this, but like, I want to keep learning, keep being curious, and keep allowing these different knowledge areas to feed each other. And research has also been a really important, I would say research skills have served me really well, as we'll see a little bit later. But yeah, and then after I finished my degree at Temple, my master's degree, I started working in journalism. And that was also just a very interesting way to use research skills, writing skills that I had, gotten from college and graduate school. So all right, so I will move on. So it was while I was at Vassar that I realized that I wasn't going to be a poet. I actually wanted to write fiction. I can remember at GA writing poetry in the hallways, but I found a lot, this sort of door opened to me in college when I started taking courses with some authors, and realizing that, it was a little bit more challenging for me to take on like that sort of scale project at the time, but I was really excited about to tackle that. And so through college and graduate school, I was working on fiction. And when I started my career in the working world as a journalist, it was sort of always in the service of what can I do that will allow me to also write fiction and would give me some space and time and flexibility. And that became more true after I became a freelance writer. I was and had a lot more flexibility to work on fiction. So at some point, I took a class with an author in Provincetown, Julia Glass, and she said, "You know what? I think you should write for young adults. I think your skill set, like your voice and your writing skills are really well suited to that audience." So again, it was like another turn I was not really expecting, but I jumped into that, and very lucky, very good timing. There was sort of like a renaissance in 2005 to 2012 is when my first book came out, of YA books. And so I first published this series. It's 3 books: Pretty Crooked, Pretty Sly, Pretty Wanted, which are kind of adventure heist stories. And then followed that up with Coin Heist, which is a standalone book that was made into a Netflix movie, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I was very lucky to kind of have some success on that front.
Okay, so before you get off this slide, I just want to ask you, how did you know? I'm sure there's people on the call who are going to be thinking, I write all the time. I don't know what to do after I've written something. So the thing that's been entrepreneurial about you all along is like taking a risk, figuring out how to get started and just bootstrapping yourself and just kind of doing it. So can you tell us how you got your first agent on this? And then I'm just really interested when Coin Heist was picked up for a film, how involved were you in the script writing of that?
So so I'll answer that first. That I was probably more involved than most in that situation. I wasn't actively working on the screenplay, but I did meet with the director and kind of consulted with her on it, and she really wanted my feedback. We had a really nice rapport, so it worked. But I was also like, this is your take it and go with it, because you know better what works on this big screen. I understood that there were just so many different storytelling conventions and
Yeah.
that would work better in film. But and then as far as getting an agent, I really there wasn't a ton of information online at that time. There was some. Now there's so much more, of course.
Yeah.
But I, really dug into the whatever I could find online that would tell me how to do this. And if I had to write my whole first novel before I could even pursue an agent and query an agent. And that one actually was never commercially published. I did self-publish it, to not much effect, but
I
I
loved it. I read it. I loved it.
it was fun, and it was like a really good, kind of first step into this world for this audience. And it got me my agent. My agent loved it. She just could not sell it, and that's
Yeah.
the reality of the publishing world. But so yeah, so I figured out how to write a query letter. All of this was online, and research agents that might be interested in the kind of work that I was doing. And yeah, so that it was, pretty much kind of learning as I went.
That's great.
Yeah. All right, so I'll move on. So, there's a lot of when I talk about my career as not being linear, it's also not kind of moving on from one thing to the next and letting the first thing go. There's a lot of sort of parallel threads that continue. So from 2000, when I left my newspaper job, I have been a copywriter. And so that means, I work for lots of different clients. Some of my clients are communications agencies who need work across multiple accounts, or maybe they just call me for one account. Sometimes I'm working directly with my own clients. Often those are universities, or nonprofit organizations. But it's been a really fun work, because I sometimes get to work on teams, but a lot of times I get to work alone. I have a lot of flexibility. I'm always, always, always learning and talking to different people and really learning about so many different industries. And a lot of what's going on in Philadelphia, I feel always just immersed in so many interesting things that are going on in the city. So it's just been a fascinating career. And I don't, I really never intended to let that go. Like, even if the books took off or the baking took, like, I still want to do this work. And it's also, again, kind of fed into, I've noticed things that I've learned through doing, client work creep into a fiction story, or, so
Yeah.
there's always material there to draw from.
Yeah, I experience the same thing. Like when I do commercial photography, it's almost a relief to have a very discreet thing that I know I have to deliver in a space where I know something has to look. It has to look a certain way. Like compared to when I'm working on my own art, it's just because you are out of whole cloth inventing this thing on your own and like taking big swings with it. without really an end goal in mind, or the hope that maybe someone will exhibit it. I always like having that balance between commercial and personal work, more personal work, because it just keeps me sane
Yes,
and somehow grounded. I wonder if you experience it the same way.
definitely. And I think, one reason is just the reality of creative fields where there are gatekeepers, and
Yeah,
it was never, I mean, it might have been possible for me to just like really push, and go all in on the fiction writing, but you're still really subject to so many forces in the marketplace and what's in and who wants what. And I mean, it is you've so little control if you're trying to do traditional publishing. So, I knew that I couldn't really count on that as
right,
to live on. And I still wanted to, have a life. I still wanted to, I didn't want to be in a shack, like, to make
right. Yeah, right.
so, this work kind of gave me that security, and still does, and participating in the world and not being so isolated.
Right.
But yeah, and I think it's a really nice balance to have those constraints, the formal constraints of a project that's due and they need X, Y, and Z, and versus working on a big open-ended creative project.
Sure. Well said.
So this takes us to more recent times.
I
So
can't believe you're best of Philly. Of course, you're best of Philly. I've eaten your cookies. They're amazing. You could cry when you eat them. But okay, I digress. Tell the story of this amazing new venture for yourself.
So on the left is a picture of my laptop in a writing residence in Virginia, the Virginia Center for the Arts. And in early 2020, I was there. Had applied for residency to really focus on an adult book that I was pretty far along in, and I wanted to finish that draft. Um, so it was beautiful and idyllic and quiet, and I have a young son. At the time he was 6, so it was just really not having to worry about making breakfast and doing dishes, and just really, or my other day job, all of those other client things. So really just working on this book, and it was so lovely. And then I came home, and of course within days things started to shut down for COVID. And my first grade son was schooling from home, and yeah, we had to become teachers. Anyone with younger kids at that age, remember that. And then, my husband was also working from home. So it was just everything kind of converging, and not a lot of that space and, kind of contemplative time to be able to work on my book. So I had to put it aside. But I still felt that I really needed a creative outlet. And this was like a very interesting experience to realize that the creativity in and of itself was the thing that I needed. It almost didn't even matter what
Yeah, yeah,
I was doing. It just was such a human need to
sure.
really be making something. And I'd always baked and cooked, and loved to entertain and bake for friends. But now we weren't seeing friends. We would maybe, I could leave packages on their porch or whatever, but there wasn't a lot of time to do that. So I started this company called Care Package Bakes, which at the time I thought, I could make these little selections of baked goods and bring them to other moms in the neighborhood who are just overworked and exhausted, who need a little lift, who need something special. And it was really kind of like, I just want to be the neighborhood baking lady. Like that was how it started. I just want people to like know to call me if they need something. So I, kind of took that and ran with it. And there was a big learning curve there as well, of just learning how to make a Shopify site, learning how
Oh,
to
yeah.
licensing I needed, all the insurance. It's a very different kind of business than running a writing business. So there was a ton of just new skill sets to learn. I was learning a lot of baking skill sets because I had never been formally trained. So it was really, diving into that and trying to figure out like, okay, I like the way that looks. How do I do that?
Yeah. when I see this, well, why don't you finish the story about like then how it sort of scaled up from there? Because there's so many observations I have about this that I just love this project of yours.
Thanks. Yeah, so it just sort of took off. It was very neighborhood focused. I live in Wynwood, and so a lot of my customers were my neighbors and from neighboring towns. But then my friends that lived in Philly found out about it and were like, "Oh, wait, will you deliver cake to us?" So I still do all my own deliveries, by the way.
Oh my God, you do?
Yes. Hopefully that will be something I can outsource soon. But yeah, so it sort of grew, like the word started spreading. Once I was more established, I started, trying to get the word out a little bit more. The Best of Philly thing was kind of a surprise. I, knew the person who had tried something, but I didn't know that that's where it would end up. So, and yeah, that was an amazing experience. I got to go to the
Did your
party.
business spike after that? Did you start getting a ridiculous amount of orders?
I was worried that it might be more than I can handle because I'm
Yeah.
still baking out of my own home kitchen, and it has not been yet. But it was a lot more followers and a lot more attention from the right kinds of people. I think it's just a badge of credibility that really helps. But it has not grown in a very out of control way. It's sort of like a slow,
Right.
steady growth, which I love because I'm just
Right.
not, for somebody that I do like taking risks. I like taking all these creative risks, but I also like to make sure everything is to my standard. I'm not going to
Yeah.
like take on a ton of stuff if I don't think I can do it really well. And same with
Yeah,
my
I feel the same way. When I started Elisa Ludwig, it was exactly the same way. It started small. I'd go out to the post office and someone would literally buy a piece of jewelry off of me. And, I had a full-time job. I was doing, commercial work. I was doing my artwork. And I'm like, if this thing gets big, I don't know really what I'm going to do. And then when I won the Martha Stewart, when I was acknowledged as a Martha Stewart American Made, I was like, I freaked out because there was a big uptick and I just was working all day, every day. And, my daughter was in high school at the time, Rainers was little. What is he, 8 now or 7 now?
He's 9. He'll be 10 soon. But yeah,
Well, when
still
this,
little.
they still need them. So I just want to say, I love, as I hear you walk through the history of yours, I love how joyful you sound about keeping all of these balls in the air. And I wonder if you experience what I experience, which is in a way, having all of these different things kind of happening at the same time, peppering your day with different kinds of experiences. Like for me, I feel much more awake, alive, energetic, curious, creative when there's lots of things happening at once. But it also sounds like you've figured out how to create order out of that chaos. And so, you have personal writing projects, you have commercial clients, you have care bakes, you have your family. And I'm just wondering we spent a lot of time talking about entrepreneurial thinking, right? But when you really are in the world and it's kind of how you move through the world, it's scary for a kid to imagine that you don't have one career in a box where you get a paycheck. But tell me some of the challenges of keeping things ordered, maybe some strategies around how you do it. So if any of our students are really interested in patching together this life, and their financial solvency from lots of different places, like maybe the way that you do it could be one of the models that they can consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is kind of just knowing how you work best and when. And so, for instance, for me, I really do my best writing early in the day, first thing. Like I like to just jump in and I can be very focused. So if I have a deadline and I have to produce something for a client, or I have to get a draft to my agent, that's the thing I do early in the day. And I schedule my interviews and my research later in the day. The baking right now is still evenings and weekends. So maybe if I have another, like a slower day, I might use my 9 to
But when
5.
do you do deliveries? If you're, I'm just trying to imagine your life, like you get in a car with all your boxes and deliver them. Like so you're baking at night. Do you have a single delivery day where everything gets pushed out on the same day?
So how I structured the whole business was really like, okay, I got to do this in a way that's like, I'm not going to lose my mind. So, and I have a
Right.
small space. I can't be a full service bakery. So like, you can't go on my website and order a dozen chocolate chip cookies. It's always these products that I've, kind of curated for you. And then they're only available, usually it's like around holidays. Sometimes some of the things are not, and they're only available for pickup or delivery on right now for one day. Sometimes I might have a second day, but so that simplifies it and allows me to, you know, manage my time. And
So when you say so do you kind of curate a selection of cookies that you bake at a particular time?
right. So like you can see in the middle picture here, that's my Valentine's Day box that I'm selling now. And so it's always like usually like a combination of cookies, tarts, like little cupcakes, and that and but for shipping products, like I do also do some products that I ship, and that would be more like the picture on the bottom left of the screen, like sort of big, I call them sugar cookies. They're really all different flavors, but
Yeah.
that are decorated, and those ship really well. So I like to kind of just keep that as my shipping product. The boxes are more for local delivery or pickup, and then on the right, that is a dessert board, which I would do for a party or an
Oh
event,
my
like
God, that's
catering.
so smart.
So
Yeah. Well, I think it's smart because also the artisanship of this, of your, um, of care package does require, I mean, I'm sure it's expensive to get a dessert board, but that's always, if you're having a party, desserts are the toughest thing to think about and you want to make it look beautiful. So, we don't have that much time. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I would love to hear a little bit about, I mean, I know you come from a family of foodies and great cooks, and so you were spoiled always having amazing baked goods. But this looks like art to me, and I wonder how much your painting days at Germantown Academy, because you were a really good painter. I mean, you could have easily gone off and done, a BFA or an MFA in painting, right? Like, I'm curious about how this is bringing the visual artist in you, and just even the way you're curating textures and shapes and forms. And tell us a little bit about that before we have to say goodnight.
yeah, I mean, that is for sure one of the most fun parts is like coming up with the box. I'll make drawings for myself. Well, I know I need this in the center and I'm going to need this kind, and trying to really think about it as a package. In the beginning, that my first few customers would say things like, we opened the box and we gasped, and that was like the coolest response, like, that they really felt it was special. And I really want it to be special and very personal also. So there is the creative aspect of it, of designing something you're not going to get at your corner bakery, you know,
Yeah,
no, nothing wrong with your corner bakery, but just that it's
yeah.
something a little more handmade, a little bit more, small batch. But yeah, it is definitely satisfying, that visual art side of me that I haven't really been able to really express for a while. So it's been great.
Just really one last, observation. It's when I look at care package, I love this seasonal sweets made by hand. So, it's, you're already like really defining purpose and a demographic. I feel like everything that you've done for the last 20 years, everything that you've loved, it kind of all has come together in this surprising side project. And, sometimes the most fun work we do is the most surprising work. So can you talk a little bit about how you allow yourself to be open to these surprises and then just run with it once it comes into your radar screen?
Yeah, I mean, even this project itself, I think I remember saying to people like, "Oh, in a dream world, another life, I'll be a baker," because it was always something fun, but I really had no serious ambitions for it. It just was like, I need to do something. I need to not be on Twitter worrying about the election or whatever things were going on in 2020.
Right,
And
right.
so it felt like a very productive project, but then it sort of did part of the surprise of it was that it kind of took on a life of its own.
Yeah,
And I think that that's really important for, anyone new in their career to think about, like, of course you have your ambitions and your goals, but to not feel so locked into the identity of like, I think for a while I was like, oh, I can't be a baker because I'm a writer and I've asked all these people to buy my books and I can't ask those same people to come buy my bake because it felt really like presumptuous. But I don't think you have to be locked into that identity or feel stuck there, because part of life is growing and evolving and really keeping open to possibility. And I don't know if this will ever replace the writing career, if it will ever be as big of a company as I don't know if I even want it to be, but I think
right.
it just all feels fulfilling, and that's really
Yeah.
me what's important.
I love that. And I actually think that's the perfect place to stop. Elisa, thank you so, so much. I loved seeing you. I feel like we went out and caught up. I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow night, or Heather, do you want to talk about the next 2 webinars, just in case anyone on the call needs a reminder?
So tomorrow night, we'll be talking with Kate Goldstein, class of 05, who is a senior strategist, talking about applying strategy across your career. And then on Thursday, we're talking with Sam Hosvet, class of 03, who owns a company that does work in automation and robotics. And so we were going to tap into the STEM and engineering side of our skill set in the alumni base.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's probably it. We could say thank you so much, Elisa, Heather. It's always fun for us
Thanks,
to do.
Elisa.
You too.
You're
And we'll see everybody tomorrow night.